Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Let's Discuss Cafe, where we bring you the brightest minds in the legal world. Today, we are thrilled to have Anushri Saha joining us. So, if you don't know Anushri, let me give you an introduction. Anushri is the General Counsel and Company Secretary at Cure.ai, a cutting edge AI healthcare company. With a remarkable background that spans M&A, transactional law, that spans from M&A to ESG compliance and data privacy, Anushri is a true leader in navigating the intersection of technology and law. So without any further ado, get ready for an enlightening conversation with one of the industry's most dynamic legal professionals. Hey Anushri, welcome to Let's Discuss Cafe.
Hi, Avinash. Great to be here.
Happy to hear that. So, Anushri, let's start by knowing a little bit about you. So, for our listeners who didn't have the, privilege of meeting you, would you care to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. So I am basically a lawyer and company secretary by qualification. I have more than a decade of experience advising in the legal and CorpSec space. I think predominantly for the first 7 years of my career, I have worked with law firms, and then I made the shift to in-house. And for the last 4 years, I've been working with a startup called Cure.ai, which is in the artificial intelligence domain in the healthcare space. So that's been a little bit about my journey so far.
Well said. So tell us about the transition. Initially you were working in law firms and transitioning to the in-house role. How difficult that was? What kind of preparation you had to make for that?
Yeah, so of course it was very, very different. It's nothing that you're prepared for, if you haven't worked in-house before. But I think what made it easy for me is because I had so much varied experience advising so many clients in different spaces. I think, and I had seen a lot of, the best processes and practices that each of them had adopted. So I just could combine, the best of all worlds and then, start from scratch here. Also, my journey was a bit unique in a sense because I was the first solo legal hire of the startup. So my mandate was to build out the legal function from scratch in terms of processes, SOPs, playbooks, everything, right? And also build out the team in parallel. So I think while it was different and challenging, I think it also really helped that I could have that freedom of thinking, like I didn't have to fall in line with pre-established processes. It's like clay where I could shape it the way I thought best. So I think that was, quite unique, and it really helped me figure things out for the first couple of months.
Wow. So tell us something about Cure.ai, right? I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah. That's the right pronunciation. So Cure.ai is a startup, like I mentioned. It's we basically develop AI algorithms which are capable of reading X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, and basically doing what a radiologist does, but in a matter of seconds. And, our software can basically publish the report. And if I have to explain this in a very layman language, it's basically we indirectly save lives, because just imagine a scenario if you're in a hospital and there are so many patients coming in from scans, right? But how would you know which case is critical and which is normal, right? So what the algorithm does, it reads all the scans in a matter of seconds and actually triages. So if there's a high-risk case, somebody who needs surgery, somebody who's, say, bleeding into their brain, the doctor would get an alert that, hey, you need to sort of, respond to this guy the fastest because he is critical. So that would be a very sort of layman understanding of what Cure does. In terms of the disease areas that we're capable of detecting, it could be tuberculosis, lung cancer, even COVID, heart failure, so many of them. Stroke.
Yeah. Wow. This is a great mission to be on. So, as you told us that, you were the first solo legal hire of the company. And, a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs. And they ask me this question, right? When should we hire the first legal person? So, tell us about that. How should, if somebody else also finds themselves in the same position where they have been working in law firm and now they are, the first hire of a company, a fast growing company to be more specific, what are the key learnings in your opinion?
So I'm just reiterating, if I understood your question correctly, you want to understand what are key learnings for somebody who's joined a startup? Right. Okay, so I think
building the legal function from the scratch, right? How would you go about it?
Yeah. So firstly, I think my first advice there, you should be prepared for absolute chaos, because a startup, the way they exist, like it's like you're moving fast and breaking things, right? That's the philosophy. So I think when you come in as the first legal hire and, you're really trying to establish processes, so sometimes you're essentially also slowing things down a bit for them, but you really have to figure out, that harmony and balance where, you're also trying to look at everything from a legal lens. You're trying to be cognizant of the risks that, this company should be taking, but you also have to have a very business mindset. You cannot be hampering revenues. You cannot be, and it's always that thing that legal is always seen as some sort of roadblock, right? Because we're the ones flagging things and flagging risks. So I think you really have to balance out both those aspects. You really have to not talk too much legalese, but also make business understand, fundamentally why this is a risk, and then work together to find some sort of middle ground, So I think that is really important. And I think the other advice, if I have to think of, other different things, I think it would be to just, one, figure out, your database. I think that's something which is predominantly very important. That just figure out, say, for the first, month or so, Avinash, I was just figuring out, hey, what are all the contracts that this company has signed, and just getting them in one place. What is expiring? What are our obligations under those contracts? Would we be under breach? And, just really classifying those, tracking the expiry. Then obviously, getting, also I think hiring really smart people, I think that's also key, because there is only so much that you can achieve alone, right? And really figuring out that talent game around it, right? Getting people who can support you, help you build this up, scale it up together. That's also really important.
Wow, great advice there. So, congratulations on bagging multiple awards, right? I think recently you got an award at General Counsel Vision, right, at 2024. So tell us about these accolades. How do they affect your day-to-day working? Is it affect your motivation, and what kind of things that can deliver for the startup that you're working for?
Yeah. So I think it was just last year, Avinash, that we really thought of applying for the awards. Like, it's my 4th year at Cure, and for the first 3 years, I think me and the team, we were just busy really, getting things in order, setting up the processes, setting up playbooks, SOPs, all of it, right? But I think in the 4th year, somewhere we thought that now it's time for consolidation, let's actually put everything to the test. And we think we are doing something right, but does the world think so also, right? So I think that's when we sort of made all these applications, and we wanted to see what independent jury thought of our processes, and if we've gotten something right. And surprisingly we had, right? Because we won 3 awards there. I think we also won 2 more awards after that, Avinash. So we won at the Asian Legal Business Summit for the most innovative legal team, and we won another award as well for some legal tech leader category. So now we have a total of 5 in our kitty. But I think how it helps is, I think it definitely helps us a little motivation, but more of endorsement of that your processes are well benchmarked, they are sort of industry standards, or, better than industry standards. But it's been a lot of, brainstorming by my team in general to arrive at, and we will argue with each other. We will debate on, why this works, why this doesn't work. And I think that's been the journey on how we've really gone ahead and won those. And even I think the entire art of writing it up in a way where, the jury understands, like what we've done, and also mentioning the sort of impact it has created. That is really important.
Wow. Thanks a lot for giving that context. But now it's time for a fun question, right? Do you believe that being a lawyer at a tech company should come with a special dress code? If your answer is yes, then what should be that dress code?
So I think, as a person, or even at our startup, we see that people really value the sort of freedom that they have, right, to dress. And it should, I think while startups in general are more, on the casual side, but it should be a balance is what I believe, like people should have their comfort, but it should also not be an overkill, right? I mean, you should not probably dress in clothes which, for example, just a slogan on somebody's shirt which is, considered derogatory or too loud. I mean, I just feel like somewhere we should strike that balance, So I think being in a tech startup, I think that's important, that it should be that actual balance between casual but comfortable but not too colloquial also. So that's my view.
Makes absolute sense. Thanks for that answer. Now, I wanted to understand, because you have had a experience in disputes and litigation. So now coming from that background, how do you approach risk management and risk mitigation within the health tech sector, which is, as we all know, is quite complex from a regulatory standpoint and has a lot of potential legal challenges?
Yeah. So I think, when you come from a law firm background and you've also, advised clients who have, had a hard time with disputes or litigation, I think you already have very different sort of legal lens to those sort of issues, and you're already sort of flagging these out to management and, like telling them that, hey, we've seen things go south earlier in, different clients. So I think there are multiple ways in which you can do this. One is, I think you proactively identify the risks across departments and then, work on a plan of how we are going to mitigate each of those. Also prioritizing those risks, which is high risk, which is medium risk, low. The high risk is potentially something which could shut down the business or would, send your directors or KMP to jail, right? So those are the ones which you really need to focus on and solve in a time-bound manner. So I think one is identifying, second is prioritizing, and then, third is obviously building a plan around that. Another way of managing risks is, of course, you mentioned, we're a health tech startup. So I think we deal with a lot of patient data. So obviously, data privacy, GDPR, all of this is, very sort of high risk for us. So I think the other way that we solve for this is actually getting in experts, who understand this field and getting independent audits done by them. So that, if there are any gaps that we need to address, or if there are any processes which need to be, further improved to benchmark them with global standards, you get a very good understanding of those. And obviously, we have very marquee investors who are, tracking our compliance, our progress against each of these. And especially when, you're raising funds, diligence, etc., is so sort of deep, right? I mean, where everyone is looking into your company to ensure that it's clean, it's compliant. I think that's where you have to sort of go the extra mile to be as meticulous as you can.
Wow, well said. And this is something I wanted to ask, that you are a tech company, right? And because the legal function that you have been running you have created a legal function from the ground up, right? So now, do you think leveraging technology or some kind of a software, all the various things that you do, would make your job easier? If yes, can you share some specific examples in your experience?
Sure. So I think when I started out, obviously, I was just figuring things out. So you don't have, even to implement any tech software, it's a very long process, right? I mean, firstly, you have to evaluate so many softwares. You have to understand which software works for your business. And for that, you have to first rewind and understand your business first, right? So I think for the first 2.5 years, I think I was doing what every other person was doing, maintaining data in Excel, updating trackers, etc. But somewhere down the line, you realize that, okay, this is not sustainable, especially at the scale at which the company is growing. So I think if I have to give you a few examples of the tools that we implemented, one was a CLM tool. This is very, very typical to most companies. So we implemented a CLM platform where we could, track contracts. And now it's very easy because, we have a good dashboard of which contracts are pending where. Is it pending at an approval stage? Is it pending at an execution stage? So I think that sort of visibility, and we're able to, sort of pull out statistics from there. That's really important. And, even I think not just from our perspective, right, a CLM, I mean, even if you look at it from someone who's approving contracts like a signatory, they just have to log in and they have everything in one place, as opposed to having, 50 emails scattered in your inbox, which you cannot trace. So I think that's, where the real value of these systems come in. So one was, I think, a contract compliance tool. And I think another tool that we implemented was actually a compliance management tool, which actually means under the Companies Act, there is an obligation under Section 134 BIWF, which is a director's responsibility statement, which essentially means that directors have to sign off that the company has established systems to comply with all applicable laws. When you say all applicable laws, this is a very broad spectrum, right? So a company has to actually sit down and identify what are the laws applicable to me. So we have actually done this exercise, and we have sat with, every function and this third-party vendor. So be it, HR will have their labor laws. They will have, the POSH Act applicable, compliance is there. Finance will have, compliances under, say, GST or their other tax laws. And then, legal similarly, we have Companies Act, secretarial standards, or, there'd be data privacy laws. Admin would have laws like, right from, maybe the Fire Safety Act to shops and establishments. So you really need everything in one place to ensure that, you're filing all your returns on time, your registers are updated on time, or if there are any, even displays, right? Displays which could come under scrutiny if a labor officer is visiting your office. So even these ground level things, right? You need to track, and you need to have a system which is actually giving you alerts on due dates if your registration is expiring and all of that. And this has to be automated because you cannot leave it person dependent. Somebody will, if they're maintaining an Excel tracker and hypothetically if they leave, right? I mean, how is the next person even going to know that where they're supposed to pick up from? So I think these were, two of the best tools that we implemented.
Right. And I couldn't agree more with your answer. These two tools should be the first one to be implemented by any company. But the scary part of this is that, this is what I advise to a lot of startups that, guys, okay, you haven't hired a legal person, but get a CLM tool, right? Okay, at least have some kind of a compliance tool in management. The bad part is that, all these vendors which provide such tools, they are, so secretive about their pricing, and, you have to get in touch with their executive. And, most of the startups are done by tech guys these days, right? And they hate this kind of a structure. Like, somebody will come in their office, show the demo, right? So just out, obviously, I'm not talking about your own vendors and, you haven't shared the names as well. For our listeners who are, young startups or who are planning to do, what is the general pricing for a CLM software in India and compliance monitoring tool? What is the general pricing in your opinion?
See, that's again a very subjective question.
Right.
In the way these licenses are structured, I said instead of me giving a ballpark figure, I can maybe discuss some of the factors which would help,
right,
these startup founders or other people figure this out. So I think when you talk about a CLM tool, right, I think the cost that these are split into, there is a one-time implementation fee, which is basically the license fee. Then I think it depends on the number of users who are accessing the system. So there is a per user sort of fee, which is also associated. And then sometimes they do charge you for various updates, upgrades, or customizations, right? So there could be, and then that also depends on the scale of requests or the scale of customization that you're asking them to make in the workflow. So it's broadly broken down into these categories, and it works very similarly for even a compliance management. And it would also, the other, factors which could vary, like it depends on how many entities that you have. For example, in Cure, we have an Indian entity, which has a US subsidiary, which in turn has a UK subsidiary. So if you're just one company, obviously the cost of that slashes to 1/3. But the moment you add entities to it, it increases. But then I think also after a point, if there's a large scale game going on, it will also decrease because they will give you a more discounted rate if you have more entities, or if even for users, right? Maybe I think the scale that one of our software providers have, if you have 1 to 50 users, it's so much. 50 to 100 is users. But after 100, it would come down because then they are already sort of, getting a good amount of billing from us just by through scale.
Makes sense. And correct me if I'm wrong. I understand you'll not give us a ballpark figure, but let me share my experience. Like any good CLM software will cost a company somewhere between 10 to 15 lakhs minimum.
Minimum, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And any compliance software will cost you somewhere between 15 to 20 lakhs?
Compliance, it depends. Some players be lesser than that. Because I know that some compliance management tools have also released very bundled packages, startups, because they know that there are budgetary constraints, or, there are, even manpower constraint, because it's not so simple. You implement a system, but people actually have to have the bandwidth to go and report into it, right? So I think that is also something which everyone needs to factor in while implementing this.
Well said. Because a lot of times what these vendors won't tell you that you might need a person in your team to kind of implement the softwares. Right. And it's said. So now tell us about, you mentioned about the POSH Act, right? Please tell us about how you implemented the POSH Act in your own company. And, in my experience, there are a lot of companies which should be implementing the POSH Act. They don't do it, right? So what would be your, thoughts on those companies? How do they figure out whether POSH applies to them or not? If yes, what is the minimum they can do to make sure that they are compliant with this particular act?
Yeah. No, I think firstly, POSH does apply to every company. There is, sometimes people have misconceptions. Like, sometimes people think that, I've also heard people say this, I don't have any female employees. So, POSH doesn't apply to me. But that's, not true, because, POSH applies to even if there are, some visitors who are coming to your company and there is an incident. POSH is applicable. POSH is also a gender neutral law, right? So I think this sort of awareness sometimes is also not there at startups unless, you're getting some legal advice. So I think if you talk about implementation of POSH, I think you need to just, figure out what are the mandatory compliances that you need to do. So you need to say, formulate your ICC, which is your internal complaints committee. There is a defined constitution under the POSH Act of, how many members there should be, out of which one has to be independent. One should have some sort of, legal expertise. One should be the presiding officer of that committee. So I think one is getting your ICC in place. Then I think it's also about the sensitization sessions. There are two kinds. One is, I think, for the employees at large, you need to have organization-wide trainings. But also what is important, even the ICC members who are appointed, they need to be trained. Because if there is a POSH case, you have to be educated and aware of how am I going to handle this? What are sort of the, the process, the timelines, etc. that I have to follow? And how do I, get that inquiry report in place, etc. Then let's talk about another aspect, which is, filings to be done under the POSH Act. So, there is an annual filing which needs to be done to the district officer every year. There are certain disclosures which get triggered in your annual report, to at least report on the number of cases that have occurred in the company. So I think these are just some of the basic, checks and balances that you need to have, but you need to have a readiness plan. Like if a POSH complaint comes up, how are you going to tackle it? And also I think the IC members have to have a lot of, empathy when there is a POSH case, but also there has to be a balance of, doing the right thing for the company at the end of the day. So it is a sort of, very important legislation, so as to speak, in today's times.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So, Anushree, please tell us, the buzz term of these days is generative AI, and obviously your company is also, I'm sure, leveraging this tool. So, what are your thoughts on leveraging this tool to automate some of the boring aspects of your job? What would be the 3 most boring and repetitive jobs that you wish AI should take over as soon as possible?
Yeah. So I think first let's talk about Gen AI, right? I think Gen AI is important. Gen AI and AI, right? I think anything which removes redundancies from your day-to-day life and, adds to speed, accuracy is great. But I think one thing which everyone needs to be cognizant of is that it cannot be used just in isolation. You have to have certain checks and balances. So even at our organization, we've actually rolled out a Gen AI policy, which we're not sort of banning the use of Gen AI, but we're also telling people that you need to be cognizant while using Gen AI in your day-to-day tasks, because it is, at the end of the day, you cannot trust it completely for accuracy, because there is a certain data set on which it is being trained, which may not be the most accurate or up-to-date. Then you have to have certain checks and balances that you cannot be asking or feeding, prompts into ChatGPT for anything which is confidential information, right? Because that is obviously going to, train off that data as well. So you don't want to be uploading confidential company documents, asking ChatGPT to do a proofread or, a format or anything like that. So I think some sort of checks and balances have to be there while using Gen AI, but not, banning the use altogether. And there is this thing that people say, right? I mean, I don't think humans are going to be replaced by AI, but humans will be replaced by people who are not using AI. So I think everyone needs to really leverage it to, really up their efficiency game, but be cognizant of that there are certain risks and it cannot be a complete replacement for, human intelligence. So I think that is on the AI. And if you ask me what are some of the most routine tasks that I would want AI to take care of, I think one is, just inbox and message management. I think this is something which all of us are drowning with. There is like a slurry of emails, messages that come in. So I think if, AI could just prioritize those in, categories and maybe, tell people that what are the things which actually need their attention to respond to, or maybe even write out automated responses if this is a recurring, query of the sense. So I think that's one. Secondly, I think I mentioned about updating trackers or, MIS and all of that. If AI is just feeding off it and being able to generate some of those reports on their own, and that would also sort of, take away a lot of, like what we now call as legal operations, right, in Vogue. So if AI can actually be implemented in legal operations, that would be great. And I think another use of it is especially, I think, when you're reviewing contracts or tender documents, which are easily running into, 500 pages. And we have seen AI tools which have the capability of doing it. So it's able to read the document. It's able to give you all the errors in the document. Like, is there a clause referencing error? Is there a red flag? Is there something which is not aligning with your playbook? And also maybe, say, automatically formatting the document, because as lawyers, you're always obsessed with how the final document looks, and you spend a fair amount of time maybe, just ensuring the numbering is correct, the font size is correct. So if AI could do that, it would really, save hours of bandwidth.
Wow, great answers there. So Anushri, as we are running out of time, I'll ask just one more question, right? Because a lot of law students also are listening to this podcast. So tell us, like, what should they be doing in their law school to prepare to join as an in-house in a health startup? Is there something different they should be doing in their law school?
Yes, I think it's been a while since I have passed law school, but I think if I have to talk from today's generation perspective, I think there's a lot more opportunity that they have, a lot more tools that they have at their disposal, right, to learn and, figure things out. So I think if somebody's still in college and they're looking to work at a tech startup, I think the first stage was do internships at some of these, reputed startups. So, you get, and I'm always a big believer of, practical knowledge as opposed to bookish knowledge. So I think internship is a great starting point because you get a real hands-on experience of what are the day-to-day problems that, are being encountered. And I think even following, like, you have influencers, right, on Instagram, etc. So similarly, there are legal influencers in this profession who are posting such good content on, playbooks or, they're writing articles. So I also think like following those right people, and not just in India, but globally, so that you have a very good global outlook of what's happening and, sort of latching on to some of these industry jargons that is happening, like understanding what legal operations is, understanding what legal design is. All of these things are in vogue, right? And really then, you'd be able to arrive at a very well-rounded, version of yourself down the years.
Wow, great advice there. So Anushri, thanks a lot for coming on Let's Discuss Cafe, sharing your story and the insights. It was really informative.
My pleasure, Avinash. Thank you so much for inviting me.
What an inspiring discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Let's Discuss Cafe for more engaging conversation with leading experts. Until next time, keep innovating and stay legally savvy.